My brother and I built a dating app for Africans called Trueflutter that has gotten over 10 million matches and has now grown to become the largest African-owned dating app on the continent. Apart from that, we also own a very quiet, very exclusive matchmaking service. And between both businesses, we've had over 100 weddings and thousands of engagement proposals. Many of these couples are doing incredibly well right now, and we've had a front row seat in their relationship journey, which has given us a ton of insights. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 3 very simple but very powerful relationship lessons that, if you apply, will dramatically increase the health of your relationships. Personally, I've been married for 16 years and I'm really lucky because my wife is my best friend. She's my ride or die. But there are so many things that I know right now that which, if I had known back then, would have helped us get to where we are so much faster. So whether you're single and just want to understand what to look out for when searching for a partner, or you are already in a relationship and want to know what to do to make it healthier and stronger, I've taken all the insights and all the wisdom we've gotten over the years and distilled them into this short video for you because I genuinely want to see you happy. All right, so first let's set the stage with some hard facts. Do you know that 43% of weddings end in divorce? Yet these are people who, at some point, they loved each other so much, they were so convinced that they had found the right partner, that they were willing to take vows that they would be together forever. And yet they fall apart. Now, a lot of the causes quoted, they say 20 to 40% of marriages end in divorce because of infidelity. The rest of the issues are attributed to financial pressure, communication issues, abuse, and then just drifting apart. All of these are correct, but they are symptoms of some major underlying issues which can be broadly categorized into three major issues that, if you get them wrong, they become a source of so much conflict in your relationship. But if you do get them right, they help you build a stronger, healthier relationship that defies the odds and go the distance. Right before we jump into what these 3 things are, there is something that I want to say. It's incredibly important. It's so important that I wish I could put it on a billboard or tattoo it on your arm or set it as a reminder on your phone. And it's this: love is not enough. Even if 2 people love each other fiercely and intensely, deeply and passionately, that doesn't guarantee that their relationship is going to go the distance, which is why it's so very important for people to understand in practical ways what are the things that make a relationship work and what are the things that cause it to fall apart. All right, enough said. We're going to cover 3 lessons. Let's jump into lesson 1. Lesson number 1. Compatibility is not about having similar personality traits. It's about having similar context filters. Everyone talks about the importance of having a compatible partner, but not a lot of people understand what that actually means. What is compatibility? Is it temperament? Is it personality? Is it extroverts dating extroverts or introverts dating introverts? I can tell you for free it's none of those things. Remember I said that we own a private matchmaking service. We have seen all sorts of those combinations works. Extroverts dating extroverts, extroverts dating introverts. So it's nothing to do with that. Compatibility has to do with 2 people having similar context filters. So what exactly is a context filter? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Let me show it to you first, and then I will explain it to you. Have you ever seen 2 people from 2 different religious groups having an argument? Well, it turns out one party is always trying to convince the other party that they are correct based on the religious text that they have read and the things that they've been exposed to growing up. But the thing is, the other party has been exposed to something totally different. And so they're having this debate based on different context filters. If you bring that to relationships, I'll give you another example. So I know this fantastic couple. They run a not-for-profit. And the husband grew up in a home with 5 other boys. And so they were always arguing. They would fight. They would have these very rambunctious brawls, but then 10 minutes later, everybody would be fine having ice cream, and so they were cool. And he saw that as a normal way of disagreeing and having debates. Now, the wife, on the other hand, she grew up in a home where they were super prim and proper. She almost never saw her dad raise his voice at his wife. And she and her siblings, when they would disagree, there wasn't like a lot of yelling or a lot of fights. And so she found it very odd when she got married and her husband would be upset with her and would raise his voice. She would be deeply offended. Meanwhile, the guy just saw that as a normal way of disagreeing and he would expect to pick things up 10 minutes later. But she would be cold and would give him the silent treatment for like 3 days afterwards. And then he would get even more upset. So this became a massive fault line in their marriage until they realized why they both behaved that way and the fact that their behavior meant different things to each other. So the husband would just say, hey, look, I'm just disagreeing, and that's okay. The wife would feel deeply disrespected, deeply dishonored, deeply hurt, and the only way she would respond to that was to shut him out for days. And once they understood that they were operating from different context filters, that was the first step in healing their relationship. Now, I'll give you one more example. So my son, when he was 3 years old, he went to a nursery. And at the end of the term, they would give him a report card, which he would bring home. I never read it because my perspective then was like a 3-year-old kid, like, what on earth is the report card going to say? Don't get me wrong. I went to all their parent-teacher association meetings. I have worked in education and worked for a top 100 business school for years. And so I value education, but I really didn't see a lot of sense in like report cards for a 3-year-old. My wife, on the other hand, she used to insist and say, hey, have you looked at his report card? Have you looked at his report card? And whenever she would know that I hadn't, she would get really upset. And so I wanted to really understand where this was coming from. When we had a conversation about it, she explained to me that when she was growing up, her dad would line her and her siblings up on the days that they got their report card. And there would be a day of reckoning, so to speak, where he would ask them why they scored what they scored, and he would punish them if they didn't do so well in certain subjects. And because of that, it drove her to work really hard in her academics. Now, me on the other hand, my dad died when I was 6 years old. I was raised by my mom along with 5 other siblings. And all throughout my time in primary school and secondary school, my mom never asked me for my report card even once. But I worked incredibly hard because I saw how much she sacrificed to send us to the very best schools in the country. And because of that, I never wanted to let her down. So I would work incredibly hard. I graduated with one of the best scores in my high school. And so my frame of reference and my context filter was, if you give a child enough of an opportunity to prove his own maturity, he would do that and he would excel. Her frame of context, or her context filter, was, if you don't hold kids accountable, especially when it comes to their reports, they would slack off. And so there was that clash in our understanding. So she and I were looking at the same situation from different context filters. But the moment we understood why we behaved the way we behaved, then we were able to come to a middle ground and figure out a way to deal with this that would satisfy both parties. So what is a context filter? A context filter is the unique set of experiences, beliefs, and cultural background through which a person perceives and interprets the world. It influences how they understand information, make decisions, and interact with others. The reason why it's so important to understand context filters is because they affect the way we see the world. They cause us to look at something as a universal truth when in fact, it just might be that it's only true for us. And because our identities are so closely linked to our context filters, whenever you're in a situation, in a relationship with someone, where you guys have differing context filters on things that really matter to you, whenever there's a clash, it feels like your identity is being attacked. And so that causes people to respond in fear and in anger, which is one of the reasons why you have so much conflict in so many relationships. You know, I truly believe that one of the reasons why we have so many more divorces and so many more breakups now than we used to have hundreds of years ago is because back in the day, our context filters were programmed heavily by the cultures that we grew up in and the homes that we were raised in. And there was so much homogeneity then. But now, the influences that we have that define our context filters are so much broader because of social media. We're influenced by things that we read, things that we watch, things that we hear, things that we see. People travel from one location and carry their context filters from that area to where they're going. And so you have so many more people coming from different backgrounds with different context filters, living together and having massive conflict in their relationships. This is why it's possible for a couple who are deeply in love with each other to get married in January, and by December they are filing for divorce because their context filters have collided, their marriage is filled with conflict, and they cannot understand why. All right, so if you're watching this and you're thinking, very interesting, what is the practical application of this in my relationship? Well, first off, if you are single and you are just, maybe you're dating, you want to become very aware of what your context filters are and what your partner's context filters are. And the easy way to be very conscious of this is to understand that conflict is a clue. Whenever you guys have disagreements, or you don't see eye to eye on stuff, or there are things that your partner does that really, really tick you off, that's a clue. You need to peel that back and understand, is this something that totally conflicts with my worldview and my context filter? And if this guy never ever changes, or if this lady never ever changes, will I be fine in building a life together with this person? I'll give you an example. So if you are somebody who says building wealth is really important to you, you are very hardworking, you're very driven, you're very ambitious, and it's also important for you that you have a partner that can build an empire alongside you. If you're by any chance dating someone who is happy-go-lucky, trust that tomorrow is going to work out, is not very driven, you guys are going to have a lot of problems, because you need to work under the assumption that this person I'm dating, if she or he never, ever, ever changes, will I be fine committing the rest of my life with this person? And so it's very important that you begin to understand that, because again, like I said earlier on, conflict is a clue. Look at the things that cause you guys to have a lot of conflict and try to determine what are the worldviews that you guys are working from. So to summarize point 1, it's important to have a compatible partner who shares similar context filters on things that are important to both of you. But no matter how compatible you are, it is impossible to have a partner where you will not have conflict sometimes. So when these conflicts arise, how do you resolve them? That takes us to lesson number 2. Communication is a skill, and couples who communicate better have healthier relationships. When it comes to resolving conflict through communication, there is one really important thing that I want you to know, and it's that communication is a skill. Just like learning to play golf, just like learning to play tennis, you should get progressively better over time. And couples who truly love each other and who have mastered the skill of communicating, they understand that conversations like that is not a chance for you to come and vent your feelings. They want to use that conversation to drive behavioral change. And so they want to make sure that they are selecting words and they're selecting a tone that lets their partner absorb and take in what they're trying to communicate very easily. There's a concept called the psychological immune system, and Tom Bilyeu from Impact Theory made this really famous a couple of years ago. But it basically states that the same way you have an immune system, whenever you are attacked or infected with bacteria or virus, your immune system mobilizes your white blood cells to fight the invading force. The same way we have a psychological immune system that is designed to protect our self-esteem. And so whenever anybody says anything that makes us feel bad, that is critical or negative, our prefrontal cortex begins to shut down. And instead of taking in that information, we are looking at ways to justify our behavior and to make excuses or to have counter arguments to make it seem like we weren't all that bad in the first place. You want to avoid doing that. Your goal should be, how can I have this conversation in a way that is calm and doesn't seem to be attacking the identity of the person that I'm trying to speak to? You know, if you listen to relationship coaches and marriage counselors, they always talk about addressing the behavior and not the person, attacking the behavior and not the person. And that's what's going to eventually help you get the kind of results and the outcome that you want. So what's the takeaway from point number 2? It is that communication is a skill that could literally save your relationship. If you learn how to give feedback without triggering the other person's psychological immune system, and you learn how to take feedback without letting your own psychological immune system come in the way of things, you will literally build a relationship that is bulletproof. So we've covered lesson 1 and 2. Now it's time for the final lesson, number 3. Disconnection is caused by emotional needs not being met or feedback not being taken. Now, point number 3 is the simplest, but for most people, it is actually the hardest. See, relationships can die in 2 ways. It could be dramatic, where there are lots of big fights or one partner cheats and boom, everything is over. But it could also die very slowly. It just gradually withers away and people drift apart. And actually the latter could often hurt because one party may not be aware of how bad things have gotten until the other party comes and says, hey, I'm no longer in love with you and I want a divorce or I want to break up. And I think the latter can hurt so much because oftentimes it comes as a shock or it feels like something that's not in people's control. But what a lot of relationship coaches and marriage counselors will agree on is that this latter part is caused by people's emotional needs not being met in the relationship. And there are a lot of things that cause that. we all have different needs, and I don't want to generalize, but for example, if a woman wants to feel loved, she wants to feel needed, she wants to feel beautiful, she wants to feel appreciated, and she's not getting that from her man, it can be very hard. It could feel almost cringe to sit someone down and tell the person that you're missing that. Or if a man wants to feel admired, wants to feel respected, wants to feel loved, it can feel almost cringe to sit down and tell your woman, hey, I would like to feel this way, but I'm not feeling that from you. It's a very difficult conversation to have. It's actually easier to argue and say, hey, you did this and I don't like it, stop it, than to say, I wish you would do this more often. Like, I would feel so much more appreciated and loved if you did this for me. It's a much more difficult conversation to have. It requires a lot of emotional honesty, but also a lot of emotional awareness, and the best couples do this. But if you're thinking, what's the practical approach here? What's the best way to achieve this if I feel I'm missing this in my relationship? Well, if you are in this situation, the best way to navigate this, number one, the easiest way is reinforce the behavior whenever you see it happen. Like, there are some people that maybe the problem is that they don't get that enough from their partners. And so one of the things you can do is to heavily reinforce it whenever it happens. If he does something that makes you feel the way you want to feel, or if she says and does things that make you feel the way you want to feel, do you want to see more of it, then you reinforce that heavily. Oh, when you did this yesterday, it made me feel amazing. When you said this yesterday, it made me feel amazing. The more you reinforce a behavior, the more you see it happen. But what if this person isn't even demonstrating that behavior in the first place, so you don't have an opportunity to reinforce or to reward it? Well, then you pull up your big boy pants or your big girl pants and you go ahead and you ask. But this is the best way to go about it. Start by asking the person first if there's anything that they would like to see or have you do more of that would make them feel more loved or respected or beautiful or admired. And 9 times out of 10, when the person responds to you, they would typically ask you the same question as well. And then you get the chance to express what it is you're feeling. And even if they don't, it still will be less awkward for you at that point after they've responded to then make a request and say, I would love if you did more of this and if you did more of that. And again, I know for a lot of people, it may feel a bit cringe or it may feel a bit difficult to do this. But if you think about how this could potentially strengthen and build your relationship over the years, it is totally worth the effort that it takes to do it. So I know I've hit you with a lot of information in this video. The one big takeaway from this is that love is not enough. If you want to build a relationship that stands the test of time, you cannot leave it to go on autopilot. Just like a garden gets overgrown with weeds unless you tend to it, you need to put in the work to help your relationship become stronger. Now, if we wanted to break it down to the core lessons from this video, lesson number 1, compatibility is not about having similar personality traits. It's about having similar context filters. Lesson number 2, communication is a skill. Couples who communicate better have healthier relationships. Lesson number 3, recognizing and understanding both your own and your partner's emotional needs strengthens your relationship bond. In this video, what I've shared with you has been the best relationship advice that we've been able to distill from the relationship journey of hundreds of couples. But all of this advice has been built on the premise that there are 2 people who are working together to build a healthy relationship. One question that I've gotten a lot in the last couple of months from both men and women has been, what can I do to get my partner to respect me more and to treat me better? So in my next video, I'm going to be sharing with you a few very simple principles that if you follow will help you show up as the best version of yourself in your relationship. Because sometimes in order to build a healthy relationship, we need to stop ourselves from hurting the people that we love whilst also respecting our own boundaries to make sure people don't take us for granted. I will see you in the next one.